Welcome to The Work of Warriors, a podcast dedicated to bringing mental wellness to the entertainment industry. I'm your host, Kim Rapach. This podcast is dedicated to the artists we've lost to mental health, addiction, and suicide, and to those who are still suffering in silence. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to introduce today's guest, Chris Howe. Chris is a firefighter and a fire chief. And while that may seem a little different than the guests we've had on previously, I was drawn to Chris and his content on Instagram when snippets of his podcast called the Authentic Adversity Podcast, when snippets of that started coming through on my feed, I was really drawn to his voice, his message, his interview style, and most importantly, his vulnerability. Chris is the owner of Lakeside Recovery in Canada, a treatment center. Chris is the co-owner of 12 Mile Tattoo with his talented wife and tattoo artist. Chris has been sober since 2011 and is using his story to bring hope to others. If you watch his Instagram reels, if you watch his podcast snippets, if you listen to the podcast, you will very clearly hear that Chris is the poster child of a warrior. He is fighting for himself and his life and his health and his wellness, and he's using his experience to help others. Well, welcome, Chris. I'm so excited. Welcome to the Work of Warriors.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it.
I'm not sure how much you know about the Work of Warriors, but essentially, I am on a mission to end celebrity suicide.
Okay.
A question I get a lot is why celebrities?
Yep.
And it's for a couple reasons. One, it's the biggest platform. Anybody who is in front of us on a screen, and we say entertainment industry, but really I think that applies to social media, TikTok, even Instagram. When we're on a screen, when we're putting ourselves out there, it's, we are hoping to have a positive impact.
Yeah.
And so that's really the reason why the industry, plus I have a lot of personal experience in the industry. I have a lot of friends, I have some heartache. And so out of that pain has come this mission, but also I think there's a false narrative that if, we have a bunch of followers, if we're on the big screen or the big stage or winning awards, that is the key to happiness. And as well as I do, not even being in the industry, that's not the answer.
For sure.
And so there's many reasons for that. And when your content, the snippets from your podcast came across my feed, I was really drawn to your voice.
Oh, thank you.
And I was drawn to your interview style and then your story and, just how vulnerable. I think that's the most important piece. And the thing I was drawn to the most was your willingness to share your story, to be vulnerable. You look, you got this cool look, this cool vibe, and also this amazing story and this gift of vulnerability that I think draws people in that, everyone can benefit from. And also I think there's a strong message for men, given the conditioning that we put men through of the exterior that they have to have and
definitely,
how they're supposed to present to the world. And I felt like I was just drawn to how you bring your story forward. So I'm really grateful that you're, just willing to sit down and chat today and share a bit of your story. I'm wondering if you would just kind of start with just a bit of who you are and what you have going on. I know you're co-owning a tattoo shop with your talented wife. I looked at her work and she's amazing. She's very talented.
She's insanely talented. So that's one of the things I do. So I own, it's called 12 Mile Tattoo with her. And like one of my favorite pastimes is just to lay on the couch and watch her design tattoos, because watching an artist's mind work is something that because I don't have one. I don't think like that. And so to watch it go from her head out through a pen or a pencil and then the next day see it tattooed on somebody's skin with these like bright, vibrant colors. And it's phenomenal. And she's the most talented woman I've met on so many levels. So
Mm.
it's a pleasure to watch her work. It's a pleasure um, to like share my life with her. And we've got her son, my stepson. He's just been a blessing for me for sure. But that's one of the things I do. I also own a men's addiction treatment facility. It's called Lakeside Recovery, and we do recovery from addictions of all sorts. So it doesn't matter. It could be gambling, it could be sex, it could be social media, drugs, alcohol, whatever. But we cover it all. One of the big things that we do with Lakeside is we incorporate a lot of physical fitness. We do combat sports. We do yoga, mindfulness, meditation. We've got a ton of professionals that come in and help the guys. And it's been, I mean, for me, that's where my passion lies, in helping others overcome addiction and move forward in a meaningful and purposeful life. Um, and then, so the last thing I'll mention is my full-time job. And I'm a captain with the City of Niagara Falls Fire Department. Um, Currently, I'm not working. Um, I'm uh, 8 years away from retirement. I'm not working because of a mental health injury, a PTSD claim that has really shifted my life. And I'm not going to say that I'm never going to go back to work. It's I don't know what that looks like as far as like treatment in the future. I've been off for a few years now, and I have been to inpatient treatment, outpatient treatment. I currently work with a psychologist weekly. I've done a ton of different programs, and I'm constantly, for me, because I'm in recovery from addictions, and then 10 years later, I got diagnosed with this PTSD, um, and severe end of the scale for PTSD as well. I I'm a little bit obsessive about learning about recovery, and recovery from anything, right? Recovery from an injury, recovery from mental health injury, recovery from addiction, any of that stuff. I see it as so multifaceted. Like, I think all of us are we have addictive tendencies, and some of us put those tendencies in even certain things that are positive. They could be positive things, but we do it as we do it almost addictively,
Yeah.
and it brings us negative results. And so I've really, I do everything I can to keep current and updated, and for my own recovery, but as well to share with the guys at Lakeside Recovery, because um, experiential learning is, in my opinion, the best learning when it comes to this sort of thing, right? So I've been through a lot, and if I can save someone else a little bit of heartache or heartbreak, if I can make it possible for somebody to not have to go to a lower rock bottom than they're already at, then that's my mission in life, right? Like, I want, and I can do that through my experience, and imparting the knowledge that I've gained through 13 years of addiction recovery. Excuse me. I can pull on examples, real life stuff, um and that, to me, there's no better feeling to me than to help another human being overcome adversity or a challenge in life, and watch them thrive in the recovery from that, and also be a part of their recovery, right?
Yeah.
One of the things with the fire department, and I say this to to people when they ask, like, why don't, because I don't love my job as a firefighter. I never really loved it. I mean,
Mm.
it's a great job, and it's a super meaningful, purposeful job, but I never had the drive that some people that I work with have. um I was good at it, but what I didn't like about it is that you would go, so there's a problem, we go to the problem, we fix the problem, and we close the door, and we never see or hear from those people again. And I'm always left with this lingering question of, like, I wonder how they're doing. I wonder how that turned out. But with addiction recovery, I get to be a part of somebody's life, and I get to, like, walk through these processes with them. Um, and really, really, I mean, I learn a lot from somebody that I help as well, right? So it's very interactive and very I stay emotionally connected with people that way, and that's what I crave in my life is emotional connection.
Yeah,
So sorry, that
that's
was a
what was
long answer.
no, it was a beautiful answer, and I have so many thoughts and questions. I think I'll probably go a little backwards, but
Sure.
when you were talking about the follow through and wondering, what happened to those people, that was the
Hmm.
word that came forward, right? Was connection. And I
Yes.
do think that is one thing that most humans have in common is that we crave authentic connection.
Hmm.
And so that makes perfect sense to me. But what I was thinking about, Chris, is when you were talking about, wanting to help people, wanting to help them not hit a lower level. I used to be a therapist
Hmm.
and reinvented myself as a coach for similar reasons,
Okay.
wanting, really to have an impact with people who are willing to do that work. And you were
Hmm.
talking about being in recovery. And I think anybody who's studying or doing any kind of self awareness work, healing work, I think we're all in recovery from something.
Absolutely.
And so I
Yeah.
share that. It's not, there's those people in recovery. It's like, if you're human, you're likely recovering from something. You may
For
or may
sure.
not be ready to look at it, but we're all recovering from something. And it's part of this podcast is to normalize that human experience.
Hmm.
And so thank you, just for saying that, because I feel like we're really in alignment with that.
For sure.
And then to take that to kind of a different level, when you came across my feed, I heard someone who sounded like a professional in the mental health industry. And
Okay.
so I was like, who's this person? Who's Chris? And when
Oh,
I
thank
started
you.
to realize, like, oh, this isn't someone who is trained as in a professional stance, but clearly is doing so much work. It's so obvious. And I
Thank you.
really do believe that we as humans can help each other heal. I don't think it only comes from therapists. I think
For
it
sure.
comes from people who have come out of the darkness,
Hmm.
who are willing to help other people via their own lived, like you said, your lived experience. And that's
Yeah.
really powerful. And I hope people can hear that.
Hmm.
2024, therapy still gets a bad rap.
Hmm.
And there are great therapists, and there are also not great therapists. And
Yeah.
so I think if we can connect as humans based on our lived experiences and we can say, yeah, I've been there too, or me too, or, here's what worked for me. Here's my
Hmm.
hand. Let me, here, I'll just sit with you. Sometimes just being with someone and listening to them without judgment is the most healing thing we can offer somebody. And
A
it doesn't
hundred
take a
percent.
degree.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And something that I found out about my recovery, or how I learned and how I did not learn. So for context, I was introduced to the rooms of recovery at 22 years old. I bounced in and out of those rooms for about 10 years, really relapsing, and trying again, relapse, try again, relapse, try again. When I went into those rooms, I always looked at people with judgment, and I compared myself, and I didn't understand. Well, why am I not getting it? Why do they have this lasting sobriety and I can't do it? I can't do it. And when I finally, at 32 years old, when I was finally, I'll say when I was finally ready to accept recovery, I realized that I needed to relate to people, not to compare. And I needed connection with people, not judgment. And what I really needed was open, honest willingness to say, I have a problem and I need you to show me how to live. And because that person who I would ask, or any of the people in the room who had more time um, in recovery or more experience in recovery than me, because they had walked the same path as me and walked through it and now are on the other side living this happy, meaningful, spiritual life, I thought, well, that's the person I want to listen to, because they've jumped the same hurdles that I've had to jump, and they have jumped successfully the hurdles that I will have to jump in early recovery and moving forward. And I guess that's the sponsee type of role, right? Like we look to people who have successfully walked that path, and we want to hang out with the winners, right? We want to hang out with the people who have something that we look at and we say, I want a piece of that. I want a piece of that freedom and happiness that they have. And so connection and community are two of the biggest things. If you don't have those things, if I don't have those things, I should say, I don't have recovery. I'm on thin ice if I don't have those two things. And so, yeah. And I will say this, like I saw therapists. I used my employee assistance program at work. I saw therapists, psychotherapists, psychologists, whoever I could talk to, and that was wonderful. But lingering in the back of my mind, I always thought, does this person really know where I've been? Does this person really know the path that I've walked? You know, I know that they've learned it from a book, and I can appreciate that, and I know there's a lot to be learned, and educating somebody in therapy is amazing, but there has to be a piece of lived experience that they can tie into it, because I know when I work with somebody, the most engagement I can find with a person is when I can relate a story, when they're telling me about a problem they have, and I say, listen, this is what happened to me. It's not the same problem, but it's very similar. This is what happened to me. This is the steps that I was given by somebody who had walked this path before to overcome this problem, and do it in a tactful and morally sound way, and to stay in alignment with my values, and this is the result. And so when I say that to somebody that's dealing with a problem, well, they perk up, because they think, I'm assuming they think, he's in there, he's done this, and so with a therapist, if they haven't, and oftentimes I believe that therapists can't really bring in their own examples, so there is that, like, that professional line, sort of imaginary line that's drawn, so that piece is somewhat missing in the therapist client relationship. So I think that having a therapist, a sponsor, or not even, it doesn't need to be a sponsor, but a mentor in life, somebody that's just living a healthy, meaningful life that you look at and say, this is what I aspire to be. He's got, or she's got what I want in life. So let me walk beside this person, and eventually it would be, let me walk behind this person, and eventually we're going to be walking beside each other.
Right. Sure. I
Yeah.
love that so much. And I love what you said, like that imaginary line, like in the therapy office between the therapist and the client,
Yeah,
because while it's built for protection for both parties,
for sure.
it does create a bit of a division and a bit of a hierarchy, and
Definitely.
an us and them. It's me and you instead of us. And so and it, again, it'd be very beneficial. But I think also having, like you said, community, having multiple people, having more than one person,
Yeah.
having, whatever it takes for you to be well, you are worth. I don't care if it takes a team of 10 people. If that's what it takes, that's what you're worth.
And that's
Um,
great.
there's
Yeah.
no judgment. When you were talking about being able to look at someone else in the recovery process, it also reminded me, while I'm not in that specific process, I remember, and ironically, it was 2011. That's your sobriety year, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
That was the year that my dad passed. And even though he had been sick and I knew it was coming, it annihilated me.
Of
And
course.
I
Yeah.
remember the only thing that kept me going, I had a child, I had a wonderful husband, but I just thought it was going to take me out. I didn't know how I was going to survive that depth
Right.
of grief. And it was people who had lost their dads that I looked around and I saw them playing with their kids and smiling and, living. And I was like, okay, it can be done. I don't know how, but they were, in those darkest moments, they were the example of hope.
For sure.
And I think, again, no matter what we're wrestling with, that's what we need. We need to be with other people who've walked just a few steps ahead.
Yeah.
And as an example of, there is hope, there is emotional freedom, there is joy.
For
There is
sure.
beauty on the other side of this really dark
I love that.
space.
Yeah, I love that, and I I couldn't have said it any better. I really think there is a community for everybody. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be, yes, okay, I belong to recovery communities and stuff, but yeah, there's grief community, excuse me, communities and meetings. There's um, meetings for like whatever issue or ailment that somebody may have. There's a community for that person, and that's exactly what it is. It's to look around and gather pieces of hope, looking at people that are further along in the process that can assure you and reassure you that it's not always going to hurt this much. It's not always going to be this bad. There is life after whichever, whatever, insert the issue. There
Sure.
is life after this, and it can be really a beautiful process to go through that with other people, with a community. You get um, friends that are connected with you on a level like none other,
Hmm.
because anybody that's gone through adversity in life with another person or a group forms a bond, and you're not trying, but it just happens. There's a bond that you form, and it just cannot be broken. You've been through some either scary, dark, or difficult times, sometimes all of those things. But when you've done that as a group, as a community, with help from another person I think for me, knowing uh, I can't do this on my own. I need community. And when you've been through that, it's just like these people are your friends for life. They're no
Yeah.
matter how much time passes, no matter how much distance geographically there is between you, you're just connected. And I love that. That's something that it just makes me so happy. And I even with talking to other people, like I've had podcast guests on my podcast that they tell their story to me, and I feel like I've lived through it with them,
Hmm.
and we connect on a emotional level, and we stay friends. And like there's so many people that I get to go, and like now I've got a destination. I got go and visit so and so who's been a guest on the podcast. And you really do, you form bonds through talking about these things openly and honestly, and not being afraid of being judged by others, right?
Yes, yes,
Hmm.
yes. Yeah, normalize the conversation.
Hmm.
And I think, it is so terrifying when you are wrestling with whatever level of darkness, whether it's, addiction or suicidal ideation or grief, whatever it is, betrayal.
Hmm.
It's terrifying when you look out and you see people who don't understand. It's
Right.
lonely.
Yeah,
And so, the antidote to that is community, is people who've walked a few steps ahead of you. And it's medicine, I think. I feel like it's healing,
for
where
sure.
you can sit with someone who you don't have to over explain to, you don't have to go through all the details with if you don't want to. And if you want to, someone won't judge you. And I think
Yeah.
that's so powerful. And the other thing, Chris, too, is I think what I love that we're talking about is when you said there's a community for everything, no matter what you're wrestling with.
Yes.
And I just think it's so important. Can we normalize the conversation that you're human and you're alive, and to be here, to love, to live our life is also going to involve suffering.
Hmm.
And I long for the day where there's no longer an us and them, right? There's
Right.
not, and this is honestly one of my, personal and professional reasons for, um, leaving the traditional medical model of therapy,
Hmm.
because I don't believe that there's those people with mental health issues and those people without. I think we all have mental health. And just like with our physical health, we have varying degrees
Hmm.
of where our strengths and our weaknesses are. And I think they're, obviously very closely tied to our life experience.
Hmm.
But as with physical health, there are so many things we can do to build upon our wellness. So I focus on mental wellness. I certainly still think mental illness exists, but I
Hmm.
think it's a far smaller percentage. I would love to hear a bit of your story and where you've come from and how you
For
learned to
sure.
fight for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up. I'm from just outside of Toronto, up in Ontario, Canada. Um, I grew up in a household that was very cold. It was judgmental. My mom suffered with her mental health that was, and so she is somebody that um, never was willing to look at the problem. She's a highly, highly intelligent woman. Like, but so she's always thought she knows better. And it's done nothing but harm her and everybody around her. So in my childhood, I was scared of my mom. There was a lot of emotional and verbal abuse, and sometimes physical abuse as well. Um, my dad was a business guy. He was kind of coming and going. He had his own stuff as well. Um, so I didn't really feel like I had a very stable household as a child, and both parents were working. It was they were busy, and they were young parents. So something I always say, that I was taught as a because there was a lot of stuff going on behind closed doors that was um, quite embarrassing, and stuff that my family didn't want our neighbors to know about, or anybody. I've always been this message has always been driven home to me, that what happens behind closed doors stays behind closed doors. You don't talk about it. Suck it up, be a man. Walk it off. Whatever. This is life. Life's not easy. It's hard. Um, and I wasn't necessarily a hard kid. I was an emotional kid. And so I didn't know how to let that emotion out. I didn't know how to where it was safe to talk about the things that I wanted to talk about or needed to talk about. So from an early age, I just learned that you hide your feelings and you make it look good on the exterior. My mom cared about grades. She wanted me to do well. Like I said, she was a highly intelligent woman. She had a great job working for the government, and she wanted my brother and I to excel in school the way she did. She didn't care for us. She didn't care that we had a social life or not. She didn't care if we were accepted by our peers or anything like that. It was more about, what's the grade, and when you didn't make the grade, there was consequences, there was issues. Um, I remember going to my friends' houses, and so like for me, I would when I would encounter my mom, she might be a loving, caring mother 1 minute, and then if I went to use the bathroom and came back, she was the complete opposite to me. Like I didn't know which version of my mom I was going to get at any given time. And she tried her best. I know she did. I know she's not a bad person. She just has a lot of stuff that's gone unchecked for her. But I felt like it was a very cold household where I was always walking on eggshells. And so when I'd go to other people's houses, I'd feel this warmth and this cohesive family unit that I couldn't figure out. Like, what is this feeling that I get here? What is this? Like, I don't
Mm,
understand. And it was love that I
yeah.
was feeling. It was connection that I was feeling. I'd hear people talking about, like, how was school? What was your day like? How did that feel? And these kind of things. And I never wanted to go home. I was just very like, this feels nice. I just don't, and I can't label it. I don't know what that is, but whatever it is in this household just feels right. I want to stay here. Um, and then I go home and it'd be again the atmosphere that I was used to. So moving through school and that sort of thing, I couldn't really bring friends to my house because I was scared and nervous about what my mom might do or how she might act. And um, but again, I kept it all inside. I made it look good to everybody else that we were, a happy family, and never brought up any concerns with anybody. Um, when I was 7 years old, I had an experience with a female caregiver, and I was sort of, I guess, coerced to be involved in some sexual acts that I shouldn't have been. And I didn't know at 7 years old, I didn't know what that meant. And I really felt like at that time, my childhood was sort of like stolen from me. And I couldn't make sense of it. But then again, by this um, caregiver, I was told, she said, this is our little secret. You don't talk about this. This is between us. And so again, there's that narrative of like, don't talk about your feelings, keep it in. This is a secret. This is special between us. And you know, it's it's really disturbing to think about, but it happens so much, right? And
Yeah.
especially, a lot of men don't really talk about that.
Yeah.
But it happens to a lot of us. So moving through, as I said, I was very anxious. I was very, um, I had dark thoughts, and I had very negative, depressive sort of like bouts where just didn't want to. I didn't feel I belonged anywhere. I lived in my imagination. I found like music, like I found punk rock music when I was, you know, probably 8 years old, and 8 or 9 years old. My older cousin was hanging out with a bunch of skinheads and punks and that sort of thing, and she would come and watch us and play us music, and I was like, I felt that's where I felt like I could escape. I felt like I had an escape in music and in that sort of culture, because there was no judgment, and it was like kind of this like in your face, I don't care what you think, judge me if you want. And I liked it. It was energetic. It was dangerous. It was like there was something there for me that I could really hold on to, and I'd
It
lose
sounds like
myself in the
really
music.
strong armor.
That's what it was. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, and I found in like a lot of the music, they were screaming what I couldn't say myself,
Mhm.
and I found like that's my voice. Like these singers are saying what I am feeling, um, and yeah, it was something to hide behind, and it was my little escape. I'd lose myself in my imagination with music, and um, if I fast forward to the first time the first time I drank, I was about 13 years old. And I always mention this because the first time I drank, I got blackout drunk. I tried it. I liked it. Um, with every drink that I had, I felt my emotions that I was holding just washing away. I felt like I was my anxieties, my fears, my guilt, my shame, my remorse, all of these things, they were just washed away with every drink. And I didn't feel like I was harboring any feelings. It was just like everything felt light, everything felt easy. It was my escape. It was a much more tangible escape to me than music was, because I felt like my body was not in reality, and I hated my reality.
Yeah.
So I got blackout drunk the first time I drank, and I've never known how to drink differently. I've always drank to excess. I've always drank alcoholically, and I've always drank for an escape. I didn't drink because I liked the taste of it. I drank because I wanted to escape what I was going through at the time, and I wanted the effect. Um, and something that I noticed, and which I didn't have in my life at that time, was that the next day I woke up, a big chunk of my night was missing for me. And I had people laughing and joking and telling stories, and you were so funny last night. I couldn't believe you said this and did this. And I said, oh, it doesn't sound like me, but you know what it sounded like? The make-believe version of me that I wanted the
Mm-hmm.
world to see. And people liked it and said, come back to the party. They were older kids, right? Come back to a party next weekend. Um and so I did that. And eventually drugs would come into the picture, and the same thing that I got from alcohol, I got from drugs. And people, it was just groups of people were accepting me for the way I was when I was under the influence. And it brought me community, connection, all those things that we talked about earlier. It checked those boxes for me where they otherwise weren't checked when I was sober. So my high school days, like my Monday to Friday, I was just daydreaming about what kind of trouble we can get into on the weekend. And um, I started playing in bands and stuff like that, and we just for free drinks. Like we always had free drinks, free drugs, free. It was exciting, it was fun, and it supported our habits. I found that as time went on, it wasn't a Monday to Friday where I was daydreaming about it. I was like Monday, Tuesday, I was daydreaming about Friday, but then I made Wednesday my new Friday. And so I was picking up Frequency and the amount that I was ingesting of both drugs and alcohol. I did some things where in high school where I tried like geographical cures. Like I tried to move to another actually country. Dropped out of high school for like a semester, moved somewhere, and realized that's not. I took myself with me. I took all my problems with me. I can't outrun this addiction. And that was at 17 years old, and I knew that I had I knew that I had an addiction. I wouldn't say it to out loud, but I knew to myself, like, I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic, I have a problem. I don't drink like normal people. I I am a problem drinker. I'm a problem user. Um
And you were 17.
yeah, I was 17. And yeah, so I came back home. I tried, and I was, for me, by the time I was 18 or 19, I became an IV drug user. Um, there was something about that I don't know. It seemed romantic to me. It seemed at the beginning, right? It was a different group of people. It was exciting. It was new. It was a little more dangerous, and constantly searching for those things. But in the time that, as I was doing that, I noticed that people, like all the people that at one point were excited to see me at the party, and I was invited to everything. I wasn't really getting invited to things. I'd show up and people kind of rolled their eyes, and it was
Mm.
to me, uh, I felt the disconnect, and so I would find different groups of friends where that was acceptable, and I'd make up a reason why I don't hang out with these people anymore because they're, whatever it is, they're boring, they're this, they're that. Um, but really, they didn't want to have anything to do with me, and I don't blame them.
Mm.
I again, after high school, I moved around a whole bunch. Moved down to the Caribbean. I moved to Toronto, like into like downtown to the city. Um, just trying to resituate myself and think, okay, here's my reset. I'm gonna reset. I can be Chris, just Chris. I don't have to be Chris the alcoholic, Chris the addict, or Chris the problem. I could just be Chris, and I'd go somewhere, and I had that opportunity to be Chris, but I didn't do anything about my problems. I didn't address any of my addictions, and I didn't even know that was possible. Like I didn't know it was actually possible to fix these things. I thought just, if I go to this new place, nobody will know my past, nobody will know my story. I can just reinvent myself, and it might work for a week or two, and then eventually, like, okay, well, I'm back to my old self, because I hadn't done any work on myself. I was expecting a change of scenery to fix all my problems, and like, how naive is that, right? Um, but that's what you do when you're desperate for change and you're not willing to um, ask for help, because again, you're told, and I'm still this narrative in my head of like, don't share your feelings, and especially at that time, I'll say I've been smaller. I was smaller than a lot of the kids my own age, but I did hang out with a lot of older people, so I always felt exceptionally smaller, and I felt that I had to act crazy. I had to look crazy. I had to um, do certain things to create this bigger version of myself. And what that was trying to, and this is like, I mean, a problem that men have, and men have been brought up, and in my generation, and still to this day, I believe a lot of men are being brought up with this, like, you know you're a man, you're not supposed to show your feelings, you're not supposed to be emotional, you work hard, you play hard, you drink hard, you fight, whatever it is, you do it hard. And if you don't, you're told harden up, suck it up. Again, this thing of be a man. And our idea of masculinity is so warped that we're especially at a young age, we're almost taught, and we think that we need to be um we need to be so disconnected with ourselves that, I mean, it's very dangerous. It brings us a lot of problems and a lot of pain and suffering and heartache and heartbreak
Can I just
in
say
that.
thank you for saying that?
Oh,
Thank
of
you
course.
so much for addressing that. As you know, as a human, as a wife, as the
Yeah,
mother of a son, I'm very, very passionate and very in alignment, because even when you were talking about your mom and you learned in your family of origin that it wasn't safe to talk about your feelings, my thought was, and you've got society affirming that every direction that you turn.
for sure.
And so
Yeah.
it's embodied this
Hmm.
vulnerability is weakness. And also, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but my thoughts, is I've just studied this, but my perspective is you said it's dangerous. It's dangerous to condition boys and men this way. And
Hmm.
also, I think men and boys learn that if you don't do all those things hard and tough and strong and disconnected from your true self, it literally is dangerous. There are
Yeah.
many men who learned very quickly, if I don't take on this persona, I'm going to get my ass kicked.
Hmm. Hmm. Or it that mask of sort of masculinity drives them to the point of, you know, doing taking themselves off the planet because they don't feel
Mm,
they
yeah.
they measure up to the expectation and that sort of thing, right? And
Yeah.
um to me, I mean, okay, so I like the idea of um not just men but anybody um having strength. I think that we should all be strong, but strength doesn't look the way my father and grandfather and my that it doesn't look. It's a different picture of strength, and strength comes for me, my strength comes from vulnerability, openness, honesty, um no fear of judgment, being able to tell someone, being able to share my emotions, whether they're you know good, bad, or indifferent, but being able to name those emotions and talk about them instead of somebody saying, hey, how you doing? And I say, good, fine. It's like, today I'm
Yeah.
exhausted. I'm happy. You know what I mean? I'm grateful today. There's things that there's language that I can use today that I think is a lot stronger than this stoic. And there's nothing wrong with stoicism,
Sure.
but real stoicism, right?
Right.
But this stoic,
Amen.
um, I've got something to say, but can't I can't get it from my brain out my mouth because I'm too worried about what you think, and I'm too worried about being perceived as weak.
Yeah.
And in my recovery, and I'll get there, but in my recovery, I've found my biggest strength, my greatest strength is my vulnerability, is my willingness to share with another human being all my pitfalls, my wins, my losses, my
Your
whatever it
humanity.
is. Humanity, yeah. And
Yeah.
so and
I got a little misty there for a second. It was just
oh,
I
perfect.
really felt that it was like what you're saying is so powerful, and I don't want to miss saying that this is feels probably pretty natural at this point for you, and it's what you know because you know what you know what you know.
Yes.
But it's also very powerful and a message we all need to hear. And it's this is where the power is, because it's changing lives. It's adding value, it's adding safety, it's adding
Hmm.
security, it's adding connection to
Yeah.
a world where it's really freaking hard to be human. So again, I just want to say thank you.
Well, for sure. And I appreciate that. And um I think what it boils down to is people being able to be comfortable in their own skin, whatever that may look like. And when I was in my early 20s and still in active addiction, I guess I could tie this back into the story a little bit. I was getting covered in tattoos. I was doing steroids. I was like, I was doing everything I could to make myself look, um, this is the wrong word, but like more manly or more like scarier, bigger, like tougher. And I wasn't that. I wasn't those things. I was in my own right, I guess, but I wasn't. I was trying to all I cared about was your perception of me. I didn't even care about my perception of me because I really didn't like myself very much the way I was. And I did a lot of damage to my body that way. As far as like the tattoos, I always thought, I mean, I thought it was a great expression of art, but also I wanted it to be something where somebody looked at me and said, okay, do I really want to talk to this guy? Is this guy is there gonna be an issue here? Because back then, like, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and it wasn't as common. Like, it wasn't like you go to Starbucks and you see tattoos all over somebody's hands and neck the way you do today, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't accepted the way it was. Um, and my grandfather had a ton of tattoos. He was a Navy guy and in World War II. And I just, he was kind of the guy that I looked, and he was that toxic male figure that was, that I looked at as like, that's a real man. You know, he's hard, he fights, he drinks, you know, he was abusive, he was like all the terrible things. But in my eyes, that was the version, that was a picture of a man. He was always on horses. He was like a cowboy type of guy. Like there was all these legends of him fighting and all these things. And I thought that's what I have to look like. That's what I have to be that's what a man looks like, you know?
That in itself, in its own right, reinforces this: I'm not worthy, I'm not enough.
Yeah. Well, and that is my, I guess you could call it, my core negative value, or my core negative thought that I've had my entire life. And that's something that I work on still today, is that unworthiness. I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. And I'm not enough for whoever's in front of me at the time. That negative core belief that I carried through life was that, yeah, I wasn't worthy, and I wasn't enough. That's bitten me a lot in relationships. It's hurt me in professionally with what I did for work or do for work. What it really drove was my need and want to just like disappear, and that came in the form of drugs and alcohol. So it was, you know, because I didn't feel like I was enough when I was sober. When I got intoxicated, that's when I was comfortable in my own skin, and that's when I could act like myself. And, you know, I don't want to say, because I've done a lot of really ridiculous and hurtful things when I was under the influence, and that's not that was maybe that was myself, I guess, at the time, or what I was really feeling, because I didn't like myself. In fact, I loathed myself. I hated myself. Today, that's not the case. But back then, when I got drunk, I got to tell anybody how I actually felt. I got to act how I felt, and I didn't fear any consequences, because I was either in a blackout, or, you know, the alcohol or drugs, whatever I was ingesting, most, you know, usually both, had my inhibitions so low that, you know, I didn't care if you you know, punched me in the mouth for saying something. Well, whatever. It's, you know, I'll deal with the pain of that tomorrow.
Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, if I can maybe go back to the story, just, you know, I'll say this: like, I was introduced to the rooms of recovery at 22 years old by somebody who saw in me a problem before I was willing to admit to another human being that I had a problem. Um, you know, he caught me at a desperate time, and he brought me to my first meeting at 22 years old. And, you know, I felt in that meeting that I walked into the same feeling that I felt when I went to my friends' houses as a child.
Mhm.
And, you know, I identified it earlier as love, but it was connection, it was happiness, it was community. It was, so yeah, it was, they loved each other. And what they loved even more was living sober together, like living a life sober together, and enjoying, like, being a part of that together. Um, and that was the tie that bonded them all. Was, you know, we're all working as hard as we can today for another day of sobriety, and if I can do something to help you get another 24 hours, then
Mhm.
let me know, because if I help you, that helps me, and we both get through that 24 hours together.
Yeah.
But you know, I walked into that room and I compared myself to everybody. I judged everybody. I didn't relate to anybody. Named every reason why I didn't belong in that room. I neglected to identify the reasons I did belong in that room. And I think, the reasons I did belong in that room, the list was a lot longer than the reasons I didn't. But, I made the reasons that I didn't paramount because, hey, I'm the youngest guy in the room. I haven't like wrecked a car yet. I haven't lost a marriage. I haven't got fired from a job. I haven't got this, all these things I haven't. And every time I'd say that, and at the time, I hadn't been thrown in jail. I hadn't been, all these things. And the guy who brought me to the meeting, every time I would say I hadn't, he'd just end it with one word. He'd say, yet. He said, you haven't yet. He's like, you keep going the way you're going, all those things will happen to you.
Yeah.
You will be that guy on the street that's eating out of a garbage can. You will be that guy behind bars. You will be that guy wrecking cars. You will be that guy on the run from the cops. That will be you if you don't stop now. Don't let yourself get there. You don't have to hit that bottom. They've hit that bottom for you. Now, that's where you're going. Let's cut it off here. And he'd always tell me, he was a low bottom drunk, meaning that he had to hit a very low bottom, a very low. And he's like, if I could have found recovery as a high bottom drunk or a high bottom addict, I would be so grateful because it would have saved me so much pain and suffering.
Yeah.
And he's like, right now, you can be you can have a high bottom. It's a bottom for you right now, but
Sure.
you don't have to go any lower. And, me being the stubborn, know-it-all, also like just not wanting to, really not open to suggestion or open to, I have my interpretation of things and I wasn't willing to listen to yours. So I had to prove it to myself that, and I think when I went back out, I might have stayed sober for 2 weeks or something, and I went back out. My idea was let me prove him wrong. But looking back at it, so I tried this over 10 years. I tried this about 50 or 60 times. I'd go try to get sober and then I'd run out and I'd say, I'm going to prove all these people wrong. I can drink like a normal person, or I can use like a normal person, or I'm not like them. Let me show them that I'm better than that. But really what I was doing, looking back at it today, is proving to myself that I was exactly like that. Right? I had all the isms that they had, I shared with them. And so I started to, those things that hadn't happened to me yet started to happen to me. And in the process, I mean, I'd also gotten out of a job there, and I went back to school and I had become a paramedic. I was no good at it. And quite honestly, I cheated my way through school, and I got on the road and realized, oh my God, this is real. These are people's lives in my hand, and I didn't really achieve the things that I have a diploma for. And so I realized, and I'm grateful that I realized that, because it would have been like me to say like, well, I could still do it or whatever, but I realized I wanted to do something else. And so with that experience, a little bit of experience in the emergency service, people said, well, you could either be a cop or a firefighter. And I don't have the personality to be a cop. Plus, at the time, I was a criminal and I was hanging out with a lot of criminals. I was doing terrible things, definitely not in line with my life. And I used to kind of joke about it, and I'd say like, I can't be a cop. I'll be busting my friends every day. And so firefighter was the thing that I thought, okay, well, I can go to school. I moved down to Texas. I went to school there for firefighting, and I liked it. I found community in that. I liked the fact that it was a group of people doing it with one common goal. So like, there's the fire. Here's 30 of you. You guys all have a job and a role to play in this, but you're going to put this out, save whatever property that you can or lives that you can. And, at the end of the day, we've done this together as a group. I liked that. I felt safer than being in an ambulance with me and one partner where somebody's life is literally in your hands. And I found that community. And what I also found in that profession is a lot of heavy drinkers. And so something that I noticed, well, actually, I'll tell you about my first day at work first. I got a job in Niagara Falls. Um, I was happy because I got to live near family and that sort of thing. Um, and to me, being a firefighter was like, okay, I get to put this uniform on, and I'm no longer this messed up kid. I've got a big boy job. It's a job where people, I thought people would respect me just because I had the uniform on. I thought, wow, I have a badge in my wallet. How cool is that? I don't, um, and I thought, this is it. This is it for me. I get to be, this is what will convince people that I'm no longer, a problem. I can be a part of a solution now. And it also checked that, and I hate to say it again, but that man card, it checked that box of here I was the little kid who, got pushed around and kicked around as a child. Now I get to do a job that is this like typical male dominated, somewhat like supposed to be tough guy job. And it's not, I found out very quickly. But I thought, to me, that checked that box for me, and I thought, well, I remember thinking my grandfather would be really proud of me, the
Mm,
guy who was very toxic, but who I looked up to as a child.
sure.
Um, and so um, the first day I went into work, I felt different right off the bat. I had a lot more tattoos than anybody. Well, nobody had tattoos. Um, I had a bunch on my arm, and I didn't have any on my hands or my neck at the time, and so my when I did my interview, I was dressed in a shirt and tie, and nobody saw them. And then when I went the first day, they were like, "Oh, I don't remember you." I was called a disgrace to the uniform. I was, said, like, "Oh, he should be immediately fired for having this thing, those things. We can't have him. We should force him to wear long sleeves at all times." There was all these things about it where people couldn't get past it. That was 22 years ago or something now. But um, what I did notice, though, the big thing that I noticed on my very first day was a senior firefighter coming up to the group of us who had just been hired, and he said, he was on his way out, right? Like he was a 30-year veteran, and he said, kind of like talking to us like an adult talking to, or like a man talking to a child. And it was like, if I could tell you guys one thing to carry through the rest of your career, it's to never show your weakness around here. You get paid well to see things that other people don't have to see. You get paid well to experience things that other people don't have to see. You don't talk about it. You suck it up. You walk it off. You be a man. All those same things that I've heard my entire life. And something I can't remember if it was him or somebody else that I got the message, is that we don't talk about it, we laugh about it, then we drink about it. And those words were like deafening to me, because I'm like, oh my God, here I am again in this, like, now again I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict trying to hide that in a profession where heavy drinking is celebrated, but alcoholic drinking is like a problem. So I have to walk this very fine line of like, I want to be the heavy drinker because, I looked different. I was smaller than the rest of the guys that I got hired with. I didn't have as much experience as the other guys. I felt lesser than, and of course, then my belief of myself that I wasn't worthy of that uniform. I wasn't man enough to do it in my mind at the time. Um, and so I thought, well, I guess my role in this career that I have is going to be the party guy, the heavy drinker. And because I saw everybody talk about, wow, look, you should see how much this guy can put back, and he could drive home. It's no problem. And it was this, like, I don't know, this celebrated thing when somebody can, drink their face off, but still somehow keep it together enough to get behind the wheel, which is like so backwards. um but I tried to be that guy. I mean, I was an alcoholic, always have been, so that didn't last too long. People, I quickly got labeled the alcoholic. um and no sooner that I was labeled the alcoholic, people found out that I was also using drugs. I was, and I was kind of ostracized at work, rightfully so. I was taking advantage of sick time. I was like showing up under the influence. I was like a terrible, terrible employee, a terrible coworker, a terrible public servant. I was doing the city of Niagara Falls a huge disservice by putting that uniform on at the time. So I went a bunch of years, trying to I was living two separate lives. Like on my days off, I was like this wild um addict running around with criminals doing criminal stuff, acting just I was a problem. And then I put my uniform on, and I'd act like everything was fine, and like I was this upstanding citizen. And those two worlds just quickly collided. I got to a point in my career, in my, I guess, drinking and using career, as well as my professional career. It was about 8 years that I had on the job, and I absolutely detested the thought of myself. I was to the point where I was like isolating. I had always my doors locked, my window, like my curtains drawn. I lived in my basement, basically, just desperately like drinking, using, chain smoking, just I hated the sight of sunlight, or and I hated the sight of myself. Something I mention always in when I do interviews is that I took down all the mirrors in my house because I couldn't stand to look at myself, and I couldn't stand like who I had become. Like if I looked at myself in the mirror, I'd cry, because I just, how could I let myself get to this point? In the last 3 years of my drinking and using, I attempted suicide 3 times. And, you know, to me, that's how bad it got, right? Like in my mind, things, I, I was not willing to do the work to change. I wasn't willing to do I knew those meetings existed because I'd gone there for 10 years, in and out, bouncing in and out, relapsing. But I was only taking up a seat there. I wasn't learning anything. I wasn't, again, I'll mention, I was comparing myself to everyone, to, you know, to come up with reasons why this is not working for me. And so I knew I had those visions of hope. I'd seen the people who said they had 20 years, 30 years sobriety, and I saw the laughing, smiling, joking, I just invigorated for life. I saw all that in the rooms of recovery, but I still couldn't put myself there. And so things got that bad where I tried to commit suicide 3 times, unsuccessfully, obviously, and thank God I was unsuccessful, because I guess I needed to get to that point. And so in 2011, January 2nd, 2011, I had a plan that, I just, nothing in particular was going wrong, but all those things that I said hadn't happened to me yet were starting to happen. And I started to realize, like, I'm wasting my life. I'm a waste of space. And these, this, that, that negative core value that I had of not being worthy was like becoming a real reality to me. I'm not worthy of even life anymore. Like I shouldn't be walking around. And I had the intention of that morning, committing suicide, and a fourth and final attempt. I thought, this is it. I have to really go through with this. I can't live this way any longer. And I sat down with a pen and a piece of paper, and I started to write out all the ways that I thought I could do it. That would be, for me, I didn't want to be found. I didn't want to hurt other people. I didn't want, although me not being here would certainly hurt a lot of people. I know that today. But in my mind, I had been to a lot of suicide calls. And I'll mention this too. During my 8 years in working, I saw a lot of things that really started to build up, and I wasn't talking about those things. And some of those things were suicide calls, and you know overdose calls, and that sort of thing. That I saw myself in those people. I saw and I didn't want for somebody to find me the way that I found people. on the job, like where I found people who had committed suicide, and I saw the family around, and I saw the horrific after effects of something like that. Because that stuff stays with you. It's like there's a thickness to the air, there's a smell, there's a like it affects all your senses, and it doesn't go away. You remember the look on people's faces, you remember the hysterical wife or husband or children. Like it's just it was a lot, and I didn't want that for me. And I was settling on possibly, I live 20 minutes from Niagara Falls, and I thought that, if I go over the falls, and that happens a lot there, unfortunately. If I go over the falls, there's very little chance of me making it, and there's very little chance of my body being ever found. That's just how it is there. And at some point, as I was writing this list and trying to like circle these, like this is the one I'm going to do, I got hit with this wave of emotions, and I was like, my God, like, are you seriously doing this right now? Are you seriously writing down, taking pen to paper and writing down these ways that you could take yourself off the planet, and you haven't even given yourself a chance? You haven't even become willing to do what those people in those rooms have done for themselves. And it was just like a wave of emotions that came over me, and I remembered all the people that I had said, oh, I'm nothing like that guy, I'm nothing like her or him. I remember the slogans on the walls and all the things. I said, oh, this is stupid, this is just, nobody's gonna buy into, like, this is like hippie stuff, like words aren't gonna keep me sober. And it just made sense to me all of a sudden. It hit me like a ton of bricks, where it was like I dropped the pen, crumpled up that piece of paper, I got rid of it, and I said, okay, one thing I got right, I can't live this way any longer. But the way I wanted to go out, I can't do it. I just can't do it, because there was something in that moment that I finally became teachable, and finally became able to relate myself and my story to all the stories that I'd heard over that last 10 years of bouncing in and out of the rooms. And it just made sense to me. I don't know how else to explain it. Some people will say it's a spiritual experience or whatever, but it was like the light bulb went off in my mind, or went on rather, and said, and something just said, like, you're exactly like those people, and that's where you need to be. So I went to the first meeting that I could find, and I say this often, it was the same room that I had been going into for 10 years with a lot of the same people, and they'd always look at me like, there was never any judgment. It was like, you're back. Okay, amazing. You're back. Like, let's give it another go. And I went into that room, and it just felt different. I went in with a new set of eyes, ears, and a new open heart, I guess, if I could, that's the best way I can explain it. And true willingness. Like I was finally able to sort of wave that white flag of surrender. And, the first person that shook my hand, it was a guy, and I shook his hand, I started bawling my eyes out. I cried, and he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "This is what I was going to do just like 5 hours ago. I was planning my suicide, and I'm here instead." And it was like, there was not one person said, "I can't believe you," everyone just said, "You're in the right place. You came to the right place. We're so happy you're here." You and so I joke about this sometimes, because it was a discussion meeting where, everybody gets 2 or 3 minutes to share something about how their day is going, or something about their recovery, or a reading that we've done or whatever. And I didn't quite understand that, I guess, at the time, or maybe I was so hysterical. And as I said, like, I finally, in letting out my emotions, crying in front of another man, in fact, crying in front of a room full of strangers, but holding another man's hand, like shaking his hand, I wouldn't let it go. And I just cried and cried, and he gave me a hug, and it was the release that I had been holding in for 32 years. Like, I was 32 years old when that happened. Like, and it was the release that I'd been holding in for all those years that was finally like the floodgates opened, right? And so I joke about this. I said it was a discussion meeting, but I made it my own speaker meeting. Like I made it all about me, and I just kept talking and talking, and these like amazing people around me saw that I was getting what I finally needed. They'd seen me come and go for 10 years, and then they saw me finally. Like I was just taking up a seat before. I would never share. I would never talk. I might tell you my name, but that's it. And I just was outpoured everything I could, and it was like I was carrying a backpack and two suitcases full of rocks or stones or whatever, anvils. And with every minute that passed, it was like one was being offloaded, one was being offloaded. I just felt like this, like I was like getting space in my body again, that I didn't have to hold this stuff in. And from that point on, I did nothing but go to the gym, uh like work try like learn what to feed my body, learn how to train my body, learn how to stay sober. So I was either with my sponsor, I was at a meeting, or I was at like a retreat, or I was in a self-help book, or some sort of, or I was with a therapist, or I was at work. And when I went, I started going back to work, and I realized, I was scared. I was very scared to tell everybody that I was sober. I was very scared to say to all these people, I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I'm sober. And I thought that they would judge me, and I for sure 100% thought they're going to see weakness in this. And that guy told me I can't show my weakness. They're going to prey on me. And I don't know what happened. One day I was probably 3 or 4 months into recovery, and I just went into the staff room, and everybody was joking around with me. They're like, Chris, like, so good to see, like your skin doesn't look gray anymore, and like I can see the whites of your eyes, like you're not bloodshot, you're like, you showed up on time every day this month, and you actually came to work every day. And they're like, what's going on with you? Like what why the change of heart? Like, what are you doing? Like, what's and they would joke about it. And finally one day I was like, yeah, like I've just been going to these meetings, and I'm, I need to tell you guys that, like, I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. And everybody starts laughing, and then and I was like, oh, they see this weakness, they're about to, and they're like, did you think we didn't know? Like, they're laughing, they're like, finally you said something. And so what I did notice is, what I found out is that a lot of people were talking about me, but not a lot of people were talking to me at work. So nobody ever came up to me and said, we see this behavior. Is there a problem? Is there something we can do to help? It was just like, talk about me when I'm not in the room, I guess, or put me at stations that where management can't find me or see me. And I was a bit of a pariah, so they just like tucked me away at different places. And anyways, they laughed, and they said, yeah, we've been waiting for this. We thought either you were like, we thought you'd either get sober or an early death for you, or you'd end up in jail somewhere. And they were right. They were right. I'm just grateful that my path was the one that, the one of sobriety, and not the other two options. I learned, I had to go back to square one with work, especially. I had to go and ask some, I was 8 years on the job, and I was asking like the brand new guys, like, hey, can you teach me how to do the thing, like catch a hydrant? Can you teach me how to do these things that are very basic things? And I'd say to them, like, I was here for this stuff, but I wasn't present for this stuff. And I just started telling my story to these new guys, and they, and I thought to myself, well, I gotta do something. So two things: I have to build myself back up from the ground up, which I was doing in all facets of my life. Well, the other thing is, I identified and I realized that I need to change that narrative for those guys coming in on the first day. I need to be the one that says, hey, I was a terrible, like I said, I was a terrible public servant. I shouldn't have been a firefighter. I shouldn't still have this job. And I took everything for granted. And thank God I'm still here in this job. But these are the mistakes I made. And I didn't talk about, and I didn't talk to anybody about this stuff. And I tried to put on this mask, and I tried to act a certain way and behave a certain way. And for lack of a better term, it was bullshit. I was only fooling myself. And, I started to tell my story very openly and honestly. And my training division started thought, whoa, you need to do this for every shift. Let us make a training evolution out of this, because people need to hear this. This is really good. Nobody's talking about this stuff.
Mhm.
And then I got noticed by some filmmakers that made a little short film about me, and a company, a Canadian company that has treatment centers across Canada, um, hired me on to do public speaking, where I went around to emergency service departments across Canada, um, and businesses and all sorts of different places, just telling my story. And then they brought in a clinician to talk about what they could do as a treatment facility for an employee who was like I was. Um, and so I became this sort of spokesperson for recovery. And it was it felt so good. I was making a little bit of money doing it, and I felt like, wow, this is really my place. And I felt like it was such a meaningful, purposeful way to live. Because I truly felt like I was making a difference in somebody's life, and quite possibly saving a life or two in the process. Um, and I'll say this, I'm an addict of all sorts. I became a little bit addicted to talking about this stuff and to helping others. And for me, I took on too much. I took on a lot of sponsees. I took on a lot of other people's problems or issues, and I felt like I could help, and I really genuinely wanted to help people. But I started to neglect myself in this process of helping others. And it was quite ironic. I was going around talking about, helping others, being open and honest, and talking about your feelings and sharing this, and not bottling things up. And as a public emergency service worker, a cop, a firefighter, a paramedic, what military, corrections, whatever it may be, we're going to see stuff, but we need to get that stuff out. We need to talk about it. We need to debrief. We need to really, really change that conversation in our departments, because the old model does not work anymore. And we know better today. Let's be the ones to make that change. So it was ironic, because I was going around sort of touting this message, but along the way I was losing a bit of myself, and I was overwhelming myself with helping others. I was neglecting to fill my own cup up. Do you know what I mean? So I was emptying out everywhere. But I wasn't going back to the place where I needed for myself. The self-care piece was on the back burner, because I felt like I was this frontline worker for anybody who reached out for help. Um, and then in my job, I found, even in recovery, I did quite well after I built myself from the ground up. I became a captain at my work, which I thought never would be possible. I just didn't think again, not worthy, right? Um, and I achieved those little accolades along the way. And but I started to I wasn't taking care of myself. I was going to these calls and not talking about it, and I did for a while, but then I saw some things. One call in particular, it was an overdose death of a close friend of mine, and I didn't tell anybody I knew him, and he had been gone for a few days, and it was not a very good scene. Um, and I started to notice that I was having nightmares, I was having panic attacks, I was having, um, I had met my now wife, but then girlfriend, um, and she'd say, there's you're not, this isn't the guy I met. There's something going on. Why, what's up? And, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night, severe panic attacks, where I'd be telling her, if this goes on for another 2 minutes, call me an ambulance. I'm gonna, I need to, I couldn't, I couldn't handle it. It was debilitating. And the nightmares were so vivid, and my moods were what I look back at at it and think now, and my wife and her kid had moved into the house, and I look back at that time and I think, my God, that's what my mom was like mood swings like crazy and just like, unpredictable. And I was like that for a short period of time there. And um, but I just was not. I wasn't. I wasn't walking my talk, I guess. I wasn't taking my own advice and like sharing this with another human being or talking about what's really going on. I just like, oh no, it's okay. I'm really stressed. I've been like I got stuff going on, and I'm sorry. I'll change, and excuses. Until one day, I went to work, and it was a night shift, and it was about 3 or 4 a.m. and we got called out to a basement fire, and I hadn't had any of these panic attacks on a call, but I was the first truck in, and I was the captain of the truck, so I went in, I brought my guys downstairs, and basement fires are because there's like foundations, right, that are concrete, so they're very, very extremely hot and dangerous because there's not a lot of space for the fumes to go or the heat to go.
Sure.
So we get down, I start walking down the stairs, and I feel one of these panic attacks brewing, and I get to the bottom of the stairs, and I have a full-blown panic attack in a basement fire in all my gear on and I'm the captain, and I'm stuck. I'm just in this stuck position. My guys, I can remember my guys saying like, come on, let's go. What's the problem here? And I didn't know how to answer it because I didn't want to tell them that I was having a panic attack, or I couldn't even put words together at that time. But when I kind of snapped out of it, I just wanted to rip all my gear off. I was beside myself.
Yeah.
And I made up a story, and I went on the radio, and I said I had an equipment malfunction, and I needed to back out of the fire. And I said, oh, it was my breathing apparatus, and it wasn't really working, and somebody else had to go and do the job that we were sent in to do, which is fine. But in my mind, two things. Now, these panic attacks have gotten to a point where I can't do the job that I was so proud of being able to do, and now now I'm making up stories. Like that's not me in recovery. I'm making up lies about, and some people after the fact have said to me, well, you didn't really make a story up. You did have an equipment malfunction, but the equipment was your brain, not not your actual equipment that you were wearing. So I can kind of make peace with that in that way. But the next day I went and found a psychologist, and I talked to a professional about what had gone on because I was scared. I thought, never have I been able to like physically not be able to see a job through, especially in recovery, at work. And I just thought something's got to be up. And, I've had all these warning signs, like I need to talk to somebody. And they said, and I was 10 years into recovery at this time. So I had 10 years sobriety, and talking to the therapist, she said, have you ever been tested for PTSD or anxiety? And I said, well, no. And it was an odd thing to say, but I remember saying, no, I'm sober. I'm 10 years clean. Like, I don't have any of that stuff. Like, I've taken care of all this stuff. And she's like, well, would you humor me and go through this testing and answer honestly? And I said, 100%, I'll try. But like, I'm telling you right now, like, I've been clean for 10 years. I've done the work. And that was my major malfunction there. It was like in saying I've done the work, because the work never ends. And so, and I assume that she probably heard I've done the work, and she thought, okay, perfect. This guy's, he's a prime candidate.
Yeah.
So my test results came back as sat on the severe end of the scale for PTSD and anxiety. They told me you can't go back to you can if you really want, but our professional opinion is that you don't go back to work until you get proper therapy for this and treatment. So I said, okay, I don't, in my mind, I was scared to go back to work. And so I didn't, I said, yeah, I'll go off work and I'll get treatment, because recovery was exciting to me. I liked recovery. And so I thought, okay, instead of looking at it as a big negative, I thought, well, here's a chance for me to get reinvigorated with recovery, and let me, like, this time I get to do it clear-minded and clear, like, you know what I mean? I don't have to come off of drugs or alcohol. I go in and, I got excited about the recovery from, a mental health injury. So I did that. I went to a 14-week recovery program on the West Coast in British Columbia. And so I did inpatient there. I did an outpatient program. I still currently, as I mentioned earlier, work with my therapist once a week. And I've done several other courses and that sort of thing. And I'm, definitely on my road to recovery from this as well. But with PTSD and going back to work, there's a real, the therapist, there's boxes to check that they're not satisfied with yet. So I'm not back to work. And I don't know if I will, but I'm super open to whatever comes my way. But I guess to sort of wrap it up, my life today is amazing. I get to be a good husband, a loving father to my stepson. I get to be involved and present in all the things that my family does in a way that I'd never been able to before. I'm able to, like, with the work that I continue to do. And as I said, like, it's a never ending job, right? You're always going to be learning and exploring new modalities of treatment, or new facets of the treatment you're already in.
Yeah.
And so that, to me, I mean, it's exciting, it's fun, it's meaningful, hard work, but what's fun about it is that I see the fruits of my labor in, what matters the most, and that's the people under my roof, right?
Yeah.
And the people that I get to help with Lakeside Recovery. I get to have conversations, do podcasts, stuff like this, and connect with amazing people as a result of just, talking about this openly and honestly. And I've I think in all the sort of ups and downs I've had in and out of recovery, I think that that message that rings true always is that you know a problem shared is a problem halved, and that, like, if you keep it in, it's gonna bubble over and it's gonna hurt when it does, right? I've proved that to myself too many times to not wholeheartedly believe that that's the truth. And so today, I think the most manly thing that I can do, the most masculine thing I can do, is talk about how I feel, talk about the good times, the bad times, and everything in between, with in an unapologetic way, where I don't have to worry. It's my story and I own it, but I don't have to worry about what you think of me, because I'm good with me today. And that, to me, is the most masculine thing that a person can own, is their own story, and their own, to be comfortable in their own skin, and comfortable and at peace with their past, and
Yeah.
sort of hopeful for the future, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I
Thanks for the
relate.
opportunity.
Absolutely. I relate so much. I have a similar, kind of dark soul of the night kind of experience where that light bulb goes on.
Yeah.
And that's where I learned, like, oh, I have to really fight. And,
Yeah.
for you, you're talking about, recovery from drugs and alcohol. And then when you talked about where you became kind of obsessed with talking about it and helping people, that was me
Mm-hmm.
as a therapist. I had done some really good work. I had healed through a lot of trauma. I was standing, I had a beautiful family, and now I was over extending myself, helping,
Right.
until I lost myself. And so I share
Right.
that so deeply with you. And so thank you for, for talking about that. What I'm wondering is, what are your, maybe top 2 or 3 things that you do Like, what are your non-negotiables? What do you do on a daily basis to
Mm.
not only stay sober, but to stay in this place of self-acceptance, self-love, being comfortable in your own skin and being able to enter the world from that place? Because it's powerful. So what do you do to, I know it doesn't always stay like that. Like, we don't just get there and arrive, but how do
Yep.
you foster that regularly?
So I guess what I would call sort of my maintenance work
Mhm.
on a daily, is meditation and self-reflection are two things that I I know for me, there's never a negative result in either of those two. So when I'm in meditation, or the after effects of meditation and the effects that carry through my day, whether it's one meditation or 4 or 5 meditations through the day, whatever I get to do, it gives back so much, and it keeps me grounded and in this sort of like present time awareness. And that's a huge thing for me. um you know the other thing, and this is not so much, I mean, uh I believe that um the mind body connection is so huge. So if I keep in physical fitness, and that doesn't necessarily mean going to the gym every day, but moving my body in a certain way, maybe it's stretching, maybe it's a rehabilitation day for me, or it's a something that um something that gets the endorphins going and also gives me a release. So for me, a lot of my um, I use exercise often as a coping tool. So I'm like one of those weirdos who likes doing burpees.
Mm,
And so I know that, like, if I'm going through a hard time, if I do 100 burpees um, consecutively, it is hard enough work that I forget about everything else that's going on. I have to stay present in that moment of, like, let me just get through the next one, the next one, the
mhm,
next one, the next one. It's repetitive. It's somewhat meditative to me. But after I'm there, I've never felt I've never felt worse after doing 100 burpees than I did before.
mhm,
I'm in a better headspace. It's my separation from the minutia of my day that might be bogging me down, and it
mhm,
gives me that separation to say, okay, I did something physical for myself, and good for you, pat on the back, you are worthy of that. Like, you were able to get through a grueling, something that's very difficult, and something that a lot of people can't do as well. And so it's a little win for me, but it also gives me that separation, and um that time to just be away from, like, to step away from whatever's irking me or whatever's bogging me down, like I said at the time. So when I go back to that issue or that problem that I might have had, I'm going at it with a bit more of a compassionate angle, or empathetic angle, where I'm not maybe stuck in the selfish, self-centered, all about me type of frustration, or whatever it is, right? So those are two things that I do. I mean, I do a ton of other things, and something else I'm going to mention is that a day doesn't go by that I don't talk to another alcoholic or another addict or
mm,
another person that is and may still be suffering with their mental health. And so to me, that connection, if I and hey, and I'm super lucky. My wife is in recovery as well, so I have a built-in support network, under my roof, which is fantastic, and
yeah,
we get to pass those morals and values down to our son as well. Um, so those are some things for me, that really um, are non-negotiables in my day, and they're things that, if I don't have them, or if I don't check the boxes, like, I'm a couple days I might be okay, but I know that it's gonna those are my releases and my sort of little refuges. So after a few days of not having that, it's gonna start to bubble over again.
yep, yep,
Yeah.
yeah. I love the
Hmm.
mind body connection, and I really believe, I'm one that say, like, I'm not one to say mindset is everything. I think it's
Hmm.
important, but it's
Yep.
not everything. And that physical piece, it's just like doing therapy or doing like trauma informed, like the trauma informed coaching that I do, where I, it is mind, body, spirit. It's,
Yeah.
whatever's coming up in your body is telling you where the deeper roots are, right? But when you go through an experience that maybe you're afraid of, and you go through it and you don't die, you
Mm-hmm.
build resiliency. And
Yeah,
so,
for
for
sure.
you, it's burpees. For me, it's weights. And,
Yeah.
it's like, it does train your brain that I am capable. I
Mm-hmm.
am resilient. I am
Yeah.
powerful in healthy ways. And I
Yeah.
don't have to run from my emotions. I don't have to try to bury it. And so it's all, I think it's all powerful. It's all part of it.
I completely agree. Yeah.
The other question I want to ask you, and I guess we can, well, I'll have one more after this, but this is the
Mm-hmm.
powerful one. This podcast, your podcast, it's certainly not a replacement for mental health treatment, right?
No.
But also, you and I want to normalize this vulnerability, talking about our experiences, our lived experiences. If there were someone listening right now who, maybe is in a place in that dark where you were when you were writing out how you could leave this planet. And,
Mm-hmm.
the day that I, felt the same way, like, we know we've been there. We know we're not the last ones to go there. Somebody is there right now. If they were to
Yeah.
hear this, what would be a word of hope that you would offer?
Mm-hmm. So the message that I would want that person to hear is that you simply don't have to live this way any longer, that there is a solution. Um, and, and that solution requires, wholehearted attention. And that solution, something I tell people in early recovery is that, you can't walk into the woods for, 2 months and expect to turn around and walk out in an hour. So we need to put in work. We put in work in our addiction in a negative way. We need to be willing to go to the same length and further that we were to get our drug of choice or our next drink or whatever it was for our recovery, because when we're doing the work, our addiction is outside doing push-ups, waiting for us to waiting for a moment of weakness, right?
Mhm.
We need to build the resiliency. We need to build the coping skills, and and fortify ourselves with the armor against a relapse, or that sort of, that dip in mental health,
Yeah.
or emotional health that may bring us back to a place that we're desperately not wanting to be in. But the main message, I kind of went off a little bit, but the main message is that yes, you don't have to live that way any longer, and there is a solution. However, that solution requires work from you. And something that I tell everybody is that the only thing you have to do in recovery alone is to walk through the room, or walk through the door, rather. You have to ask for help, and that's the only thing you have to do alone. Everything else, you'll have legions of people willing to help you, whether that's online, in person, through like message boards, whatever it is. There is a ton of people out there living happy, healthy lives that are well adjusted in recovery. And they're all, I don't know any alcoholic or addict in recovery who is living in alignment with their recovery, who's not 100% willing to help anybody reaching out for help. So I think that's a big thing, is that the last thing the only thing that you have to do alone is ask for help, and everything else will help get you through there.
I love that. Thank you so
Mm-hmm.
much. Chris, between the podcast and, being a therapist for, 10 plus years, gosh, I think it might have been 20. And, being a coach now, and all the conversations I have been so fortunate to have. This is truly, truly, truly one of my favorites. The work that
Oh,
you are
wow.
doing is powerful. Like, yeah, it's powerful. And you have an amazing story, and you have an amazing gift at sharing it.
Thank
Um,
you.
I feel like we could talk for hours. Um,
For sure.
we both have dogs to get back to, so we can end
Yeah,
here.
definitely.
I do want to, if you could just tell our listeners, I just think it's powerful. And you have a podcast that you didn't even talk about. How can people find you? What's the easiest way for people to connect with you?
So, as far as social media goes, it's Instagram, I guess. My personal Instagram is at underscore Chris underscore Howe underscore, or you can visit the podcast Instagram. It has a bunch of clips, so you can see if it's something that you wanted to watch the long form version of. But that's at Authentic Adversity. And then if you're interested at all, if you're in Ontario and interested in inpatient treatment, you can look at Lakeside underscore recovery, and that's our men's addiction treatment facility. So, and we're again, we treat addictions of all kinds. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. You are definitely a warrior and have so much to offer. And I just thank you for being you.
Well, thank you, Kim. It's an honor and a pleasure, and I'm so happy that you reached out and got this, got us connected and got this going, and I'm really happy, and I hope that anybody listening or viewing that hears something in this, that the main thing is that I always want to be sure that I'm putting a message of hope out there for anybody who's still sick and suffering and willing and wanting for that chance at a new and better life. So I hope it lands on the right ears, and it usually does. That's the way that these things kind of go. So I really appreciate your time, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I look forward to staying connected. Thanks, Chris.
Definitely.